There's a certain kind of violence that doesn't make a sound. It arrives in a crisp, official envelope. It speaks in city ordinances and building codes. My son-in-law, David, didn't come at me with a sledgehammer. He came with a clipboard and a lie, and he nearly took everything. My son-in-law didn't just want my house. He had it declared a public nuisance by filing false complaints until the city forced me into a renovation I couldn't afford, with his company as the only approved contractor. The betrayal began with a whisper campaign. A city inspector showed up, citing an anonymous tip about crumbling brownstone masonry. Then another for outdated and hazardous knob and tube wiring. "It's for your own safety, Nora," David said, his voice oozing with manufactured concern as he showed me the official condemnation notice. He pointed to a city inspector's report. "The wiring is from the 40s. The brickwork is unstable. The city is demanding these repairs." Patricia, his sister, stood beside him, her expression one of sterile, professional concern. "We've structured a very favorable loan against the property's equity. My firm will handle all the paperwork. You won't have to lift a finger." "I don't want a loan," I said, my voice small and thin in the high-ceilinged foyer my husband and I had restored ourselves. "This house is paid for. It has been for 30 years. David's smile was a thin, bloodless line. "Not anymore, it isn't." I felt the walls closing in, not from age, but from the weight of their conspiracy. My home, my sanctuary filled with 50 years of memories and the gentle ghosts of my quilts, was being condemned by paperwork. Mr. Alastair Finch found me sitting on my front stoop, clutching the violation notices, the city's red ink blurring through my tears. He took one look at them and scoffed, the sound a comforting, familiar rasp. "This is bureaucratic nonsense, Eleanor. David's playing a dangerous game." He returned the next day, a triumphant gleam in his eye and a single, brittle sheet of paper from a microfiche reader. "He overplayed his hand," Mr. Finch said, his voice trembling with vindication. He handed me the paper. "Your house isn't just a house. It's a designated heritage structure in the old Maple Terrace Historic District. The district is dormant, but the designation is legally binding. His renovations, replacing the windows, sandblasting the brick, aren't just aggressive, they're a felony." He pointed to a dense paragraph. "And look here. I have a friend in the IT department." The anonymous complaint about the wiring was filed from a law firm's IP address. Patricia's firm. The fear in my chest, a cold, tight ball, began to harden into something else. Something sharp and cold and patient. Something that felt like a needle, ready to stitch his lies back onto himself. Our counterattack was a masterpiece of quiet, administrative vengeance. I played my part, the overwhelmed, grieving widow, stalling David with tears and confusion. Meanwhile, Mr. Finch formally activated the heritage designation with the city's preservation board. The repair order was nullified overnight. He then provided a dossier of evidence to a sympathetic city council member who launched a sharp investigation into the fraudulent complaints. David's company, Crestline Renovations, was suddenly facing hefty fines and a suspended license, his city-approved status ripped away. Cornered, his business imploding, David fought back with a poison-tipped arrow aimed at my heart. He came to me not with lawyers, but with a single, grainy photograph. It showed my beloved late husband, Robert, in a heated argument with a man I didn't recognize, hands clenched, faces tight with anger. "Did you ever really know him, Nora?" David hissed, his voice low and venomous. "Robert had dealings. This man was a known associate. This house? We think it was purchased with dirty money. I'll go to the press. I'll tell them the cherished brownstone is a monument to corruption. I'll destroy the legacy he loved so much. Drop the preservation order. Sign the loan. Or I will burn his good name to the ground." I felt the foundation of my life crack. But Mr. Finch's faith was a steadying hand on my shoulder. "We investigate, Eleanor. We find the truth." And we did. The shady associate was Robert's cousin, an investigative journalist. The photograph was taken moments before Robert handed over a trove of documents, evidence of a kickback scheme involving a corrupt city official who had been trying to force out longtime residents like us. The dirty money was Robert's entire life savings, moved carefully to protect it from being seized by the officials' allies. My husband hadn't been a villain. He had been a silent hero, protecting our home and our neighborhood. We didn't just defend. We completed his work. Mr. Finch and I took the full, true story to the local newspaper. The headline read, "The Brownstone Guardian: How One Man's Secret Fight Saved a Neighborhood." The article exposed the old corruption and, in doing so, exposed David's blackmail for what it was, a vile attempt to slander a local hero for personal gain. The final unraveling was swift and satisfying. The city investigation led to sanctions against Patricia for abuse of process. David's company, stripped of its license and reputation, collapsed under its debts. My brownstone was officially landmarked, its legacy and its stone facade secured for generations. Now, the parlor floor of my protected home is the stitching post, a quilting studio and community workshop. I teach young people how to piece together fragments into something beautiful and enduring. They thought they could tear down my history and rebuild it for profit. But they didn't understand that a home, like a quilt, is made strong by the stories woven into its very fabric. To anyone whose foundation is being shaken, remember, the threads of truth are stronger than any lie. Hold them tight. And sometimes, the most beautiful patterns emerge only after the fabric has been pulled taut, tested, and found strong enough to hold. The city's official landmark plaque was bolted to the brick beside my front door, its brass gleaming in the sun. It felt less like an honor and more like a shield. A quiet satisfaction settled over the brownstone, deeper than the initial thrill of victory. The battle was over, but the war for my peace of mind had entered a new, subtler phase. David and Patricia were gone, but their absence left a hollow, echoing space where family trust had once been. The first sign of their lingering poison was a series of negative reviews for the stitching post on local community boards. Cliquey one read, "The owner is unwelcoming to new ideas," claimed another. They were small, petty barbs, but they were designed to needle me, to make me feel watched. Mr. Finch, who now spent his afternoons drinking tea in my sunlit parlor-turned-studio, saw it for what it was. "Termites, Eleanor," he'd grumble, peering over his spectacles. "They can't knock the house down, so they're trying to chew away at the foundations from the inside. We must be vigilant." The next salvo was more direct. I received a letter from a fictional community standards board questioning the commercial use of a heritage property and threatening fines. The letterhead was convincing, but the return address was a vacant lot. It was Patricia's legal mind, still twisting in the shadows, trying to use bureaucracy as a cudgel one last time. This time, my response was different. The fear was gone, replaced by a cool, methodical anger. I didn't just dismiss the letter. I took it to my friend on the city council. We turned it into evidence, further cementing the narrative of their relentless harassment. A restraining order was issued, a legal wall as solid as my brick facade. The final, unexpected shift came from an unlikely source, my daughter, Sarah, David's wife. She had been silent throughout the ordeal, trapped between her mother and her husband. One rainy afternoon, she appeared on my doorstep, her face pale and streaked with tears. "He's gone, Mom," she whispered, her voice raw. "He left. He said I was a reminder of his failure." She held out a small, crumpled piece of paper. "He left this for you." It was a check. For a fraction of what he'd cost me, but it was accompanied by a single, scrawled line, "For the repairs." It wasn't an apology. It was a surrender. And in its own pathetic way, it was the most satisfying victory of all. He was broken, and he knew it. Sarah moved back into her old room for a few weeks, a ghost of the daughter I'd known. We didn't talk much at first. We sat in the studio, the silence punctuated by the soft shush thump of the quilting frame. I worked on a new piece, a complex pattern of deep blues and silvers I called Foundation. She watched, her hands idle in her lap. Then, one day, she picked up a needle. "Show me," she said, her voice barely audible. And so I did. I taught her the running stitch, the back stitch, how to knot a thread so it wouldn't pull through. We didn't speak of David or Patricia. We spoke of tension, of grain lines, of how to repair a tear from the back to hide the mend. We were, in our own quiet way, piecing our relationship back together, one careful stitch at a time. Sarah didn't stay forever. She found a small apartment and a job, but she visits every Sunday. She's my best student now. Mr. Finch still comes for tea, and the two of them have developed a fond, bickering relationship. The brownstone is no longer just a fortress or a monument. It is a living thing, filled with the soft sounds of creativity and the slow, steady work of reconciliation. They tried to destroy my home, but in the end, they only forced me to build something new and more resilient within its walls. The past is a patchwork of joy and pain, but it's my patchwork. And I am finally, contentedly, the one holding the needle. The piece we built felt like one of my intricate quilts, beautiful on the surface, but requiring constant care to prevent unseen fraying. Sarah's return was a patch over a deep tear, but the fabric beneath remained fragile. We were careful with each other, our conversations avoiding the raw places where David's betrayal had cut too deep. The stitching post flourished. The negative reviews had faded, replaced by genuine accounts of community and creativity. But success, I was learning, could draw attention of a different kind. A developer named Robert Carson started attending our open studio nights. He was polite, impeccably dressed, and his eyes were always calculating, measuring the room's dimensions, the foot traffic, the potential. He made me an offer one evening after everyone had left. "This is a wonderful space, Mrs. Chin," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "But it's underutilized. I represent a group that sees its true value. We could transform this entire building into a premier arts collective. You'd have a lifetime tenancy, of course. A beautiful apartment on the top floor. We'd handle all the management, the marketing." It was David's play, refined and repackaged. The same greed, wrapped in velvet instead of sandpaper. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird in a cage I thought I'd unlocked. "The brownstone is not for sale, Mr. Carson," I said, my voice thankfully steady. "It's a home and a community workshop. That is its true value." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Communities evolve, Mrs. Chun. Think about it. I'm sure your family would want what's best for you." The implied threat hung in the air. Your family. He'd done his homework. He knew about Sarah, about the past vulnerability. I told Mr. Finch and Sarah about the offer that Sunday. Sarah's face paled. "He's like a vulture," she whispered. Circling. Mr. Finch set his teacup down with a sharp click. "Carson. I know that name. He specializes in whisper campaigns. Buys up properties around a target, creates noise and nuisance, then swoops in with a lowball offer when the owner is desperate." The familiar cold dread began to creep in. I was being targeted again. But this time, I was not a disoriented widow. I was a business owner, a community pillar. And I was not alone. "We don't wait for him to make the next move," I said, the words surprising me with their certainty. "We fortify." Our strategy was proactive. With Mr. Finch's archival skills, we applied for and received an even more robust historical designation, one that came with annual preservation grants. With Sarah's newfound aptitude for social media, we launched a Guardians of the Stitching Post campaign, sharing the stories of the people whose lives had been touched by the space. We made the brownstone so publicly beloved, so visibly entrenched in the community's heart, that attacking it would be a public relations disaster for any developer. Robert Carson faded away, his offer retracted as quietly as it had been made. The threat dissolved, but the lesson was seared into me. Vigilance was a permanent stitch in the fabric of my life. In the quiet that followed, a new project began to take shape in my mind. Not a quilt for a bed or a wall, but a living one. I approached the city with a proposal to turn the small, neglected parquet across the street into a community quilt garden. We would plant it in geometric patches of color, a living, growing piece of art that would change with the seasons. The project was approved. On the day of the first planting, I stood with Sarah and Mr. Finch, our hands in the soil. We were planting more than flowers. We were stitching our legacy into the very neighborhood, making it stronger, more beautiful, and infinitely more difficult to tear apart. I looked at my daughter, her face smudged with dirt, smiling freely for the first time in years. I looked at Mr. Finch, my steadfast friend. The brownstone stood behind us, not as a fortress anymore, but as the heart of a wider, resilient community we had all helped to weave. The past could not be undone, but its wounds could be transformed into the strongest parts of the pattern. My hands, which had once trembled holding a condemnation notice, were now steady, capable of both creating and protecting. The work was never truly over, and I found, to my surprise, that I was glad of it.